It began with a sound, a low, grinding roar that echoed through the sleeping streets of Hollow Creek. At first, no one thought much of it. After all, winter storms were common here. Snowplows were part of life. But this one was different. Every night, just past midnight, the sound would rise from the silence. The metallic scrape of steel against asphalt, the steady churn of an engine that never faltered. And when people looked outside, they saw it. A massive snowplow, headlights blazing, carving perfect paths through the snow. The strange part? No one was driving it. Neighbors whispered about it the next morning. Some claimed they saw the plow glide past their homes, its cab completely empty. Others swore they saw a shadow inside, something hunched and wrong, but when they blinked, it was gone. The tracks it left were flawless, straight, endless lines that cut through the town and vanished into the woods, and anyone foolish enough to follow those tracks never came back. At first, people thought it was a prank, teenagers maybe, or some kind of remote-controlled machine, but then the disappearances began. A man named Harold, a retired mechanic, told his wife he was going to follow the plow one night. He wanted to see who was behind it. She begged him not to. He kissed her forehead, pulled on his boots, and stepped into the cold. The next morning, his wife found the front door wide open. His footprints trailed into the street and then merged with the plow's tracks. He was never seen again. The town grew restless. Fear spread like frost across glass. Every night the plow returned. Every night the sound grew louder, and every night more people vanished. Some said the plow wasn't clearing snow at all. It was carving paths into another place, a place no one should ever enter. One boy, 16 years old, recorded the sound on his phone. He posted it online. The audio was strange, metallic, yes, but layered with something else. Beneath the grind of steel was a faint whisper, a voice repeating the same word over and over. Come. The video went viral. Outsiders flocked to Hollow Creek, curious thrill-seekers hoping to catch a glimpse of the phantom plow. Most of them never left. The sheriff tried to stop it. He blocked the road with his cruiser, lights flashing. The plow came anyway. It didn't slow down. It didn't swerve. It simply passed through the car, as if the metal dissolved into mist. The sheriff sat frozen, his face pale, his hands trembling on the wheel. He resigned the next day. By now, the town was unraveling. Businesses closed, families fled, but the plow kept coming. One woman, desperate to understand, tied a rope around her waist and followed the tracks into the woods. Hours passed. The rope went taut, then slack. When her husband pulled it back, the rope was shredded as if dragged across blades. She was gone. The legend grew. Some believed the plow was cursed, built from stolen steel and haunted by the souls of workers who died in its construction. Others thought it was a punishment, a machine sent to collect the greedy and the curious. But the truth was worse. One night, a group of locals gathered at the edge of town. They watched as the plow appeared, headlights cutting through the snow. Its engine roared, but the sound was wrong, too deep, too hollow, like something alive was breathing inside it. The group stood their ground, and for the first time, the plow stopped. The headlights dimmed, the engine fell silent, and then the cab door opened. Inside was nothing, no driver, no seat, just darkness. But from that darkness, something stepped out. It wasn't human, it wasn't even shaped like one. It was tall, skeletal, its body made of twisted steel and frozen flesh. Its face was a mask of shattered glass, and when it moved, the sound was the same as the plow, the grinding roar of blades against asphalt. The group screamed, they ran, but the creature didn't chase them. Instead, it climbed back into the plow, shut the door, and drove away. The tracks it left that night were different. They didn't lead into the woods. They led straight through the center of town and ended at the cemetery. By dawn, the graves were open. Every coffin was empty. Now Hollow Creek is abandoned. The houses stand silent, buried in snow. But if you go there, if you listen closely, you'll still hear it. The plow, grinding, roaring, clearing paths that lead nowhere. And if you follow those tracks, you'll never come back. Because the snowplow doesn't just clear the streets, it clears people. It takes them, and it never stops. Some say the plow is still moving, carving roads across towns that don't even exist on maps. Others claim to have seen its headlights in their own neighborhoods, far from Hollow Creek. The truth? If you hear that sound outside your window tonight, don't look, don't follow, don't even breathe. Because once the snowplow finds your street, it will never stop.
It began after the storm. A blizzard so violent, so merciless, that the town seemed swallowed whole by white silence. Roads vanished, power lines snapped, and for 3 endless days the world outside was nothing but a wall of snow and wind. When the storm finally broke, the silence was almost worse. The family, Mark, his wife Ellen, and their 2 children stepped outside to survey the damage. Their backyard stretched down to the frozen lake, a sheet of ice now buried beneath layers of snow. The air was still, heavy, and cold enough to sting the lungs. That's when they heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound. Knock, knock, knock. At first, they thought it was the wind rattling something loose, but the sound was too deliberate, too steady. It was coming from the lake. Mark brushed away the snow, revealing the glassy surface of the ice. He pressed his ear down. The knocking was louder now, and it wasn't random, it was desperate. The neighbors had gone missing during the storm. The Thompsons, an older couple who lived just across the street. No one had seen them since the blizzard began. Their house was dark, buried, lifeless. Everyone assumed they had evacuated. But now, the sound beneath the ice was unmistakable. It was coming from them.
Mark shouted for Ellen. She came running, her breath fogging in the air. Together, they crouched over the frozen lake, listening. The knocking grew frantic, followed by something else, muffled voices, screams. The children stood back, wide-eyed, clutching each other. "Daddy, what is that?" Mark didn't answer. He couldn't, because what he saw next froze him in place. Through the ice, faint shapes began to move. Hands, pale, distorted hands, pressing against the underside of the frozen surface. Fingers clawing, dragging, smearing frost. Faces appeared, blue lips, wide eyes, distorted by the thickness of the ice. The Thompsons were under the lake, and they were still moving. The family panicked. Ellen shouted for Mark to do something. He grabbed a shovel, striking the ice, but the ice was too thick. Every blow echoed like thunder, but the ice refused to break. Beneath them, the neighbors' faces twisted in agony. Their mouths opened and closed, releasing bubbles that drifted upward, trapped beneath the frozen sheet. Their eyes rolled wildly, locking on to the family above. The knocking grew louder, the screams more frantic. It was impossible. They should have been dead, and yet they were alive. Night fell, and the sounds did not stop. The family tried to sleep, but the knocking carried through the walls of the house, echoing in their dreams. Every few minutes, knock, 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 followed by muffled cries. The children begged their parents to leave. Ellen wanted to call the police, but the phones were still down from the storm. They were trapped. Mark sat by the window, staring at the lake. The figures beneath the ice never stopped moving. Sometimes they drifted closer to shore, their faces pressed against the frozen surface, eyes bulging, teeth gnashing. Other times they sank deeper, only to rise again, clawing upward, as if the ice itself was a coffin they refused to accept. By the second night, something changed. The knocking grew slower, more deliberate, and then it began to spread. Not just from one spot, but from all across the lake. Dozens of knocks, dozens of voices, dozens of faces. The Thompsons weren't alone. Mark realized with horror that the storm had claimed more than just their neighbors. The lake was full of them, bodies trapped beneath the ice, some familiar, some strangers, all moving, all alive. The family huddled together, listening as the knocking grew to a chorus, a symphony of fists pounding against the frozen barrier. The sound carried through the night, relentless, inescapable. On the third day, Ellen snapped. She ran outside, screaming at the figures beneath the ice, demanding to know what they wanted. Her voice echoed across the frozen lake. And then the knocking stopped. The faces beneath the ice turned upward, staring directly at her. Every single one, hundreds of eyes locked onto her. The silence was unbearable. And then, in perfect unison, they began to smile. Mark dragged Ellen back inside, but it was too late. The family could feel it. The ice was thinning. Cracks spread across the surface, spiderwebbing outward. The knocking returned, louder than ever. The voices rose, shrill, distorted, inhuman. The lake was breaking, and whatever was beneath it was coming out. The final night was chaos. The family barricaded the doors, the windows, every possible entrance, but the sound of cracking ice echoed through the air like gunshots. The children cried, begging their parents to make it stop. Mark held them close, whispering promises he didn't believe, because he knew the truth. The neighbors weren't trying to escape. They were trying to get in. The story ends with the family's screams swallowed by the storm. The lake shattered, the ice gave way, and the neighbors, along with countless others, crawled free from their frozen prison. No one saw the family again. Only the lake remained, silent, still, waiting for the next storm.
Every neighborhood has its secrets, but in this one, the secret didn't hide inside a house. It walked outside every morning at dawn. It began during the first heavy snowstorm of the winter. Residents of a quiet suburban street noticed something strange. At exactly 5 a.m., when the sky was still black and the world silent, a bundled figure appeared. A man, or at least something shaped like one, trudging through the snow. His coat was oversized, hood pulled low, scarf wrapped so tightly that no skin was visible. He carried nothing, he spoke to no one, he only walked. At first, people thought little of it. A neighbor getting exercise, someone restless, someone lonely. But then they noticed his route. He wasn't walking the block, he wasn't heading anywhere. He was circling, always circling, around one house in particular. The house belonged to the Miller family, a modest two-story home with a porch light that never seemed to turn off. Inside lived a widowed mother, her teenage son, and her elderly father. They were quiet, private people. Nothing about them stood out. And yet, every morning, the bundled stranger walked in slow, deliberate circles around their home. Neighbors began whispering, "Why that house? Why at dawn? Why every single day?" One resident, a man named David, watched from his upstairs window one morning. The snow was falling hard, but the stranger's pace never faltered, step after step, crunching through the ice, his boots leaving a perfect ring around the Miller home. David timed him. One circle took 7 minutes. The stranger completed it, paused at the front door for exactly 10 seconds, then continued again and again until the sun began to rise. Then, without a word, he vanished down the street. The neighborhood grew uneasy. Some tried to confront him. One man shouted from his porch, "Hey, what are you doing?" The stranger didn't respond, didn't even look up. He just kept walking. Boots crunching, breath fogging, eyes hidden. Another neighbor tried calling the police, but by the time they arrived, the stranger was gone. And when they asked the Millers about it, the family claimed they hadn't noticed. They slept through it. They didn't care. They told the officers, "He's not bothering us." But the neighbors cared, because the stranger was bothering them. Weeks passed, the snow deepened, the stranger kept walking, every morning at 5 a.m. sharp, never late, never early, never missing a day.
Children grew afraid to look out their windows. Parents warned them not to stare, but curiosity spread like infection. Soon, nearly everyone on the block was watching, waiting, counting his steps, listening to the endless rhythm of boots in snow. Then came the night when the Miller house went dark. The porch light, always glowing, was suddenly off. No lamps inside, no movement, just silence. And yet at dawn the stranger appeared, circling harder, faster. His boots dug trenches in the snow. His breath came in ragged bursts. Neighbors swore they heard him muttering, whispering words they couldn't understand. By now, paranoia consumed the street. Some believed he was a stalker. Others thought he was a ghost. One woman insisted he was a death omen, but no one dared approach him again. Because every time someone tried, they felt something unnatural. A pressure in the air, a heaviness in their chest, as if the stranger's presence was not just physical, but something deeper, something wrong. The truth came one morning when the police finally forced their way into the Miller home. Inside, they found silence, cold air, and 3 bodies. The mother, the son, the grandfather, all dead, frozen in their beds. No signs of struggle, no signs of violence, just lifeless, as if they had been gone for days. The neighbors were horrified because that meant the stranger had been circling a house of the dead. Not protecting them, not haunting them, but keeping watch, walking in endless loops around a house where no one was alive. The police searched for the stranger. They never found him. No footprints beyond the property, no trail leading away. It was as if he had vanished with the snow. But the neighbors never forgot, because even after the house was emptied, even after the bodies were taken away, some swore they still heard it, the sound of boots crunching in the snow, the rhythm of footsteps at dawn, circling, always circling, around a house that no longer belonged to anyone.
It began as something innocent, something every kid remembers. A snowy hill, a sled, the thrill of racing down in the dark, the cold air burning your lungs, the laughter echoing into the night. But this hill was different, and what happened there would be remembered as the Sledding Hill Massacre. They were 5 friends, teenagers, restless, reckless, and bored. It was the dead of winter, the kind of night where the world feels frozen in place. Midnight had just passed, and the town was asleep. But not them. They slipped out of their houses, bundled in coats and scarves, dragging old sleds behind them. The hill stood at the edge of town, a place kids had used for decades. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous, just a slope of snow beneath a starless sky. They thought it would be fun. They thought it would be harmless. They thought they'd be back home before anyone noticed. They were wrong. The first run was normal. They lined up at the top, laughing, shoving each other, daring one another to go first. The sleds scraped against the ice, and one by one they launched themselves down. The hill was steep, fast, exhilarating. They reached the bottom, breathless, faces red from the cold. But when they climbed back up, something felt off. The hill seemed longer. The climb took more effort. The shadows stretched farther. They brushed it off, just the cold playing tricks, just their imaginations. But the second run was different. This time, the sleds didn't stop at the bottom. The slope kept going and going and going. The trees blurred past, the snow rushing beneath them, the wind screaming in their ears. They should have reached the end. They knew this hill. They'd sledded it before. But the bottom never came. One of them shouted, panicked, trying to drag his boots into the snow to slow down. Another laughed nervously, insisting it was just fun, just faster than usual. But then the laughter stopped, because the hill wasn't ending. By the third run, the fear had set in. The climb back up took nearly half an hour. The slope looked endless, stretching into a darkness that swallowed the horizon. Still, they went again, because that's what teenagers do. They test the limits, they push the boundaries. But this time, one of them didn't come back. Her name was Emily. She was the loudest of the group, the one who always dared the others to go faster, to take risks. She launched herself down the hill, her sled cutting through the snow like a knife. The others followed, but when they reached the bottom, she wasn't there. Her sled was empty, half buried in the snow, but Emily was gone. They called her name. They searched the trees. They climbed back up, thinking maybe she'd fallen off, maybe she'd walked back. But the hill was silent. The only sound was the wind. And when they looked back down, the slope seemed even longer. Fear turned to panic. They argued. Some wanted to leave, to run home, to forget it ever happened. Others insisted they couldn't abandon her, that she had to be somewhere. So they went again, down the hill, into the dark, and another vanished. This time it was Ryan. He was behind the others, his sled wobbling, his voice shouting for them to wait. They reached the bottom, but Ryan didn't. His sled was found halfway down, spinning in circles, empty, no footprints, no struggle, just gone. By now, the hill felt alive. It stretched longer with every run, the slope twisting into impossible angles, the trees bending in unnatural ways. The snow grew darker, heavier, swallowing sound. The friends were trapped. Every time they tried to climb back up, the top seemed farther away. Every time they tried to stop, the sleds carried them forward. And every time, someone disappeared. The third to vanish was Mark. He was the strongest, the one who swore he wouldn't be afraid. But courage means nothing when the ground itself betrays you. He screamed as his sled veered off into the shadows. The others chased after him, but the hill shifted, the slope curving away, pulling them in different directions. When they reached the bottom, Mark was gone. No sled, no trace, just silence. Now there were two, Sarah and Jason. They were shaking, crying, begging each other to stop, but the hill wouldn't let them. The climb back up was endless. Their legs burned, their lungs froze, but the top never came. The slope stretched behind them, a white void swallowing the world. And then Sarah vanished. Jason was alone, the last one. He didn't want to go again. He didn't want to climb, but the hill dragged him forward. The sled beneath him moved on its own, carrying him into the dark. The trees bent overhead, the snow turned black, the air grew silent. And then Jason was gone. The hill stood empty, 5 sleds scattered across the snow, no footprints, no voices, no laughter. Just silence. The town searched for them. Days passed, weeks. The parents begged for answers. The police combed the woods, but the hill gave nothing back. No bodies, no clues, just sleds. And so the legend began, the Sledding Hill Massacre. 5 teenagers, 5 sleds, no survivors. Some say the hill is cursed. Others say it's a doorway, a passage to somewhere else. But no one knows for sure. All they know is that the hill is still there, waiting, growing longer, darker, hungrier. And if you go there at midnight, if you dare to sled down its slope, you might never reach the bottom. The hill doesn't take everyone, only those foolish enough to ride it after midnight. Only those who laugh at the dark, only those who think they're safe. Because the hill remembers, and the hill is patient, and the hill is always hungry.
It began with what seemed like the perfect getaway. A cheap cabin listed online, tucked deep in the woods, promising peace, privacy, and a roaring fireplace to keep the cold away. The couple, Daniel and Claire, booked it without hesitation. They wanted escape. A weekend away from the noise of the city, from deadlines, from the constant hum of life. The listing was simple: rustic cabin, winter ready, cozy, guest book inside. The price was suspiciously low, but they brushed it off. Who wouldn't jump at the chance for a secluded retreat at half the cost? They arrived late Friday evening. The snow was falling in thick sheets, muffling the world into silence. The cabin stood at the edge of a frozen clearing, its roof sagging under years of weather, its windows glowing faintly from the porch light. Inside, it smelled of pine and dust. The furniture was old but sturdy. A stone fireplace dominated the living room, stacked with fresh logs. And on the coffee table, waiting like a centerpiece, was the guest book. A thick, leather-bound journal, its cover cracked, its pages swollen from years of use. Claire laughed when she saw it. Cute, like a little Airbnb tradition. But when they opened it, the laughter died. The first entries were normal. Couples writing about cozy nights, families describing hikes, strangers leaving polite notes about the cabin's charm. Then the tone shifted. One entry read, "Do not stay here. We heard footsteps under the floor at night. Thought it was pipes. It wasn't. We left early. Please, if you're reading this, leave." Another, "The owner is not what he seems. He doesn't live nearby. He lives here, beneath us. We saw his eyes through the cracks in the floorboards." Daniel frowned. Probably a joke, people trying to freak out the next guests. But the entries continued, each one more frantic, more desperate. "We tried to leave. The door wouldn't open. He waits until you sleep. Don't look under the rug in the living room." Claire closed the book, unsettled. "It's just stories, urban legends. You know how people are." They tried to ignore it. They cooked dinner, lit the fire, poured wine. The cabin was warm, the snow outside relentless. But as midnight approached, the silence grew heavy, too heavy. Daniel froze when he heard it, a faint creak from beneath the floor. Claire heard it too. She whispered, "It's probably the wood settling." But the sound came again, a dragging noise, slow, deliberate. They pulled back the rug in the living room, and there it was, a trapdoor. The guest book's warnings echoed in their minds. Don't look under the rug. Daniel hesitated, but curiosity won. He lifted the hatch. The smell hit them first. Damp earth, rot, something metallic. A ladder descended into darkness. Claire begged him to close it. "Please, just leave it." But Daniel leaned closer. His flashlight beam cut through the black. And he saw movement. A hand, pale, veined, reaching up from the shadows. He slammed the hatch shut, heart pounding. The cabin went silent again, but now they knew they weren't alone. That night they barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside felt like footsteps. At 3 a.m., Claire awoke to the sound of breathing, not beside her, not above her, below. She pressed her ear to the floor, and she heard it clearly, a man's voice whispering, "You shouldn't have opened it." She screamed. Daniel grabbed her, pulling her away from the floor. The guest book lay open on the table, though neither of them had touched it. A fresh entry had appeared, the ink still wet. They know now. They won't leave. Daniel tried the door. It wouldn't budge. The lock twisted uselessly. The windows wouldn't open. The cabin had become a prison. Hours passed. The whispers grew louder, sometimes laughter, sometimes sobbing, always beneath them. By dawn, they were exhausted, terrified, desperate. Claire flipped through the guest book again, searching for answers. The final pages were filled with names, dozens of them, each crossed out with thick black ink. And at the bottom, a single line, "The cabin keeps what it's given." The floorboards creaked, the trapdoor rattled, and slowly, impossibly, it began to open on its own. Daniel grabbed the fireplace poker, standing between Claire and the hatch. From the darkness below, a figure rose, the cabin owner. His skin was gray, stretched thin over bone. His eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting the firelight. His mouth twisted into a grin that belonged to nothing human. He climbed halfway out, his voice rasping, "Welcome, you're mine now." The couple backed away, but the cabin seemed to close in around them. The walls groaned, the windows cracked, the door sealed tighter. The guest book flipped open again, pages fluttering as if caught in a storm. A new entry appeared, written in jagged letters. Daniel and Claire, December, never left. The cabin swallowed their screams, and when the next guests arrived weeks later, they found the firewood stacked, the guest book waiting, and the last entry warning them not to stay. But like all who came before, they ignored it, because the cabin was cheap, because it looked cozy, because they thought the warnings were just stories. They were wrong. The cabin waits, and beneath the floorboards, the owner listens, always.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss an update.